Thank you, Maria. Well, it is now time for our weekly political segment, KVUE Face Off. Joining us this morning is Rahman, the communications director for the Texas Democratic Party, and Matt Mackowiak, chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So, first thing we want to talk about this morning is the Texas Young Democrats have filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas over voting rights. Abhi, why don't you tell us a little bit about the lawsuit?
Yeah, so it's very similar to the lawsuit that we filed about a month ago with the DSCC and the DCCC. What it is basically is the Republicans passed a ban on mobile voting, which was HB 1888, and basically what it is it says that you can't pop up voting sites at college campuses in rural areas. So it affects a lot of people, and what we're saying is that it's unconstitutional. It infringes on the rights of people to vote, and it makes voting harder rather than easier, which is what we don't want here in Texas. We already have one of the lowest voting participation rates in the country.
So now, to be fair, the bill doesn't ban voting, right? It just requires mobile voting locations be open during the entire time of early voting, that entire period. Matt, I know you're like, Ashley's getting to the point. Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important clarification. You know, I don't want anyone to be mistaken and think that it bans it on college campuses or bans it in rural areas. It doesn't use either of those phrases in the law. All it says, as you point out, is that these locations have to be open the entirety of early voting. Look, as a county chair, as someone who wants to see very high voter participation both in primaries and general elections, and as someone who works with our county election office both in the primary and the general, we're always negotiating how many locations can we get more, can we serve voters better. Ultimately, it's really up to county election officials to use their resources as efficiently as possible. I do think it's confusing for voters if a temporary location is, first of all, those locations move around cycle to cycle. Second of all, some of them are open only on certain days, one day here, 2 days there. It's just very, very complicated, and so in some cases people go to those temporary locations when they're not there and they're frustrated, and then they don't turn out. I don't think that we have a whole-scale problem with people not being able to vote in Texas. Democrats want to convince us that that's the case. We had massive voting increases in 2018. I think we'll have very high turnout in 2020. There are enough voting locations. When I voted in the November constitutional election, I don't even remember how many early voting locations there were, dozens all over the city. So the idea that one temporary location somewhere is not going to be available in March or in November is going to be a huge problem, I think, is ridiculous.
Okay, but I'm going to tee Obi up for a minute, because the problem with this is there are places in Williamson County in particular where now there is no early voting location in some of these cities because they could only do mobile sites for a limited amount of time, right? This is part of the problem,
right,
you would
yeah.
say.
So what this is it's another Republican attempt to suppress the vote. Like it goes into the new strategy memo that got leaked last night too, where Texas Republicans now they're walking back on straight ticket voting. They're doing all these things as they know that the state is becoming more competitive, and I think that's what the real issue is here. Texas still has the worst voter participation rate in the country. You're seeing it's very hard to vote, and like Matt was saying, it's very confusing to vote for a lot of people. The more polling locations that are open, the better, and that's what we're fighting for. That's what Texas Democrats are fighting for, and that's why we filed this lawsuit.
Yeah. What's interesting is you mentioned that document that was leaked, and one of the things, you know, I want to give Matt a chance to talk about this. Apparently, some strategy for the 2020 campaign for the GOP party was leaked to some Democrats that were out on their mailing list. Your thoughts on this type of thing happening? We're starting to see this, I think, kind of more and more.
Well, it concerns me a little bit. I mean, look, this was a draft document. There wasn't anything too crucial in there. I don't think the Democrats were surprised by any of the content, so I don't think there's much damage. Whether this was a person mistakenly emailing someone incorrectly or something more serious like a leak, I think remains to be seen. You know, if there is a leak inside of their state party, I think that's a problem, obviously, and it needs to be stamped out as quickly as possible. Don't know that that's the case. I think that we'll find out over the next few days. But look, let me just go back to the original topic for 1 second. The Texas Democrats have spent more time suing on issues than they have anything else, and their track record in this area is ridiculously negative, ridiculously bad over the last few years. Remember when voter ID was proposed to the legislature, Democrats said it would be horrible for voters, there'd be all kinds of problems. There have been almost no problems. They sued on it, lost and lost and lost, and ultimately voter ID is in place in Texas today. They spent years, 5 or 7 years suing over redistricting. Ultimately, they lost on redistricting. So, you know, to someone out there who's considering giving money to the state Democratic Party, I would say you're funding trial lawyers. And all they're going to do is spend your money suing people. That's not the answer. The answer was they should have been making these arguments in front of the legislature, affecting the legislative process, not suing, not waiting 6 months after the legislature's over to sue.
I mean, to be fair, lawmakers did try to make these points before that bill was passed, right?
So there have been several bills that we tried to pass in the state legislature that would have increased voting instead of restricted them. In terms of money going to trial lawyers, like really what it's going to is it's fighting for the voting rights for everyday Texans. So whether you want to say it's going to trial lawyers, whether you want to say it's going directly to people to help them vote, it's really obsolete either way. Right now, voting is the most it's the most important issue, I think, in America right now. It's how do we increase the vote? How do we get more people to participate in our democracy? And Texas Democrats are committed to that. We know when more people vote, we win elections, and that's why Republicans are trying to stop us from voting. And they're trying to stop you from voting too.
Well, some damaging words here, and unfortunately, we are out of time. Of course, we're going to have more on this subject tonight on KVUE News, so we encourage you guys to watch that, and then you can rewatch this interview on our website, KVUE.com, right after midday.